likes to be called, and she is a living testament over tragedy, how one person can really be made stronger by suffering adversity. Like last year's speaker, Audrey Mabry, who's here today, and also a huge inspiration to so many of us. Zuli nearly died at the hands of her abuser, but she did not. An accomplished artist and photographer, Zuli coped with her abuse by pouring her energy into creating a multimedia photographic series called Bruised But Not Broken, an epic journey of healing, recovery, and triumph, which she will talk about today. So please welcome Zuleika Gonzalez. Zuli.
Working. Okay. I'm Latin, so I use my hands. So I said, I need a wireless mic. I'm so glad and so privileged and honored to be here today and to speak on behalf of Casa. 3 years ago, if you would have asked me if I would be here to share with you about my journey in the valley, that journey, that treacherous climb up the mountain, I would have said, you're wrong, I'm not that girl. Because I grew up in a very conservative Christian home. I think this is giving me that. And I grew up in a very Christian, conservative home with very traditional Hispanic values. And I grew up with a mom and a dad in my home, and we had family dinners every single night until I was like 16. I went to college. I graduated with honors. I was very successful in my career choice. And then when I left that to become an at-home mother, I pursued my art, and now I'm a nationally recognized and internationally recognized artist with works that have been published. Some of my work hangs in some of the fine art galleries in our nation and in a museum. And I am the face of domestic violence. You see, domestic violence is not a socioeconomical crime that affects one demographic. Domestic violence reaches deep into the homes of Snell Isle and into the trailer of a struggling family. So today, my purpose is to stand before you and to say, yes, I was a victim, I am a survivor, and to remove that mask of who we think the typical domestic violence survivor is, then that's what it is. But I really want to share with you about my journey and how I came to heal. Most of my friends would tell you that they would probably think that I was like the last person they expected to be in a domestic violence situation. I was the friend that you would turn to when trouble was on its way and you needed somebody to come knocking down the door or put somebody in their place. And it happened to me. I was so ashamed about where I was at that I didn't tell anybody, I didn't confide in anybody. And one day, after being exhausted and not sleeping, I needed to talk to somebody. So I went to Casa, and I met with an advocate, and her name is Lydia. And I told her, I said, listen, I need to tell you about some things that are going on in my life, and I need you to tell me if I'm being battered, because I'm not really sure, because he wasn't hitting me at the time. And so she said, okay. And so she asked me to fill out this lethality scale. And the lethality scale, it kind of tells you how violent the situation can become. So I said to her, well, he does stuff like, when we argue, he'll put me in a bathroom and he'll drill the bathroom door shut and leave me there for hours. He'll take my keys and my cell phone and he'll lock me in a room that locks from behind. And I'm there for hours. He's done stuff like when he was painting and we were arguing, he pushed me up against the wall and painted my face to teach me a lesson to just shut up. And she said to me, okay. And she said, well, you know, domestic violence is about power and control. So he doesn't necessarily have to have his hands on you. But based on this lethality scale, he may not be hitting you now, but he may hit you eventually. And when he does, based on what you're telling me, he will kill you. He will kill you. So I thought, okay, I was like, God, she's intense. I was like, I know, you gotta say this, you gotta kind of scare him right out of the situation. And I was like, but she doesn't really know me. Maybe I might have over-exaggerated just a little bit, Maybe he was like on the borderline of like killing you and almost like, leaving you in a bed for, a day or two. And so that was in September of 2010. And in March of 2011, he tried to take my life. She was right. She was absolutely right. So after my attack, I felt incredibly, incredibly lost. I felt incredibly disconnected from myself. Here I am. I'm an accomplished artist. I get flown all over the nation. I give workshops on my art. I had a nonprofit at the time that I was teaching disadvantaged and at-risk youth to channel into their pain and use it to fuel their creative energy into healing. And I couldn't even do that for myself. And so the trauma of my attack began to set in. And I couldn't sleep at night because I was suffering from PTSD. And I needed to talk to somebody again. And I was embarrassed. I didn't want to go to turn to any of my friends, any of my family. So I went to the one place that I knew would not judge me. I went to the one place that I heard her words echoing in my head that said, if you need us, we're here. Just come back. So I went to Casa. And I talked to an advocate that day. And immediately, when I walked in there, I started to qualify myself. I'm not that girl, I have this is what I've done, da-da-da-da-da. And she just looked at me and she said, okay. And I said to her, one of my best friends said to me, you should really turn to your art to heal. And I said, I don't want to taint it. I don't want to dirty it with this horrific event in my life. And she said to me, have you ever been in our conference room? And I said, no. And she said, well, I want to take you into our conference room. I want to show you something. Because you should really turn to your art. So she walked me into the conference room, and the first picture, there was a series of pictures on the wall in the conference room by a survivor whose name is Melanie. And I walked and I looked at a couple of them, and then I stood in front of this piece. And when I stood there, it didn't matter how many things people said to me, or things that I read, or things that I knew. I looked at this piece, and within my core, my soul began to cry. Because here I stood in front of something that completely resonated with me. I felt like I was masking who I was. And I was just in pain inside. So at that moment, it was like an aha moment, one of those like light bulb moments. And so I went home. And I set up my tripod and I put it in my bathroom. And I said, all right. I had to come to Jesus meeting with myself in the bathroom. And I said, all right, girl, you've been in the muck for way too long. If you're going to cry, now you're going to cry with purpose. When you cry, you get up out of that bed and you stand in front of that tripod. You may not know what you're going to do with it, but you take pictures. And at that moment, it was not enough to survive. I needed to thrive. I needed to shine brighter than I had ever shone before. Because I could either choose to be like a beer bottle sitting on the side of the road, reeking of its bitter content, or I could not allow this thing to define me, and I could just push through it. And that's what I did. The first piece that I did was Love Was Not Enough. I have a really good friend of mine. She has her doctorate in criminology, and she does research on domestic violence. And she said to me, how are you doing one day? And I said, I'm all right. And I said, I feel really guilty about something. And she said, what? And I said, I feel guilty because I feel like I still love him after he did this horrible thing. And she said, not a lot of people give credit to the domestic violence survivor. Not only did she walk away with her body battered, but she walks away with her heart broken. She walks away with these dashed dreams and expectations of that particular relationship. And so I went home and I created this piece. And the piece, I titled it Love Was Not Enough, because he didn't love me enough to get the help that he needed to stop being alcoholic. He didn't love me enough to stop hitting me. He didn't love me enough to stop doing the things that were causing damage to our relationship. But sadly, I didn't love myself enough to walk away from a terrible situation. So the words on this piece, all the black words are the words that he used to batter me with. The white words are all the honeymoon words that he used to bring me back. And then the red words are all the words that I use to make excuses for his behavior. And the quintessential thing in the middle of that piece, which was a picture of us, was that he said he loved me. It's what every survivor says, but he said he loved me. The next piece that I did, after dealing with that, was realizing that, yes, indeed, I'm that girl. With PTSD, I remember hearing things that night of my attack. I remember my neighbor coming out to help me when I was beeping my horn trying to get out of the car. And I remember him ushering me inside his house. And I remember saying to his wife as she was on the phone with police, I'm not that girl, I'm so sorry, I'm so sorry. And the police showing up and the paramedics showing up. And I kept saying, like, this doesn't happen to me because I'm not that girl, I'm not that girl. And telling them, I'm so sorry that you have to be there. And I had to come to terms with that. And I realized that, yes, indeed, I was that girl. And I needed to find out what happened that caused me to be there and how never to allow myself to get there in that position again. The next piece I did was, will I be all right? I have a passion to serve my community and those that are at risk and disadvantaged. And I thought, am I going to be all right? Will I be all right enough to want to do this again? Will I be all right enough to walk down the street and when somebody's walking behind me, not completely flip out? And so as I started, all these questions were coming to my head. And then I started to piece the pieces together. And I realized that, yes, I will be all right. This is going to be a long road, but I'm going to get there, and I'm going to be all right. The next piece that I did was, a river of tears. I started to talk about it because I needed to talk about it. I needed to talk to my friends. And I wondered who would cry for me. And I'm a poet, and so I started to write. And I asked questions like, who would cry for me? Who is going to cry for me when I want somebody beside me? And then I realized that one of the reasons that I got there was because I needed somebody to help me through some of the pains that I was going through in my life. And that the only person that would help me was going to be me. That I needed to push myself and I needed to cry tears upon tears upon tears until I got to the bottom of it in order to work my way out. The next piece that I did is called Veil of Shame. As though I consider myself a strong alpha woman, and it was very hard for me to open up to friends about being battered. And I would always put a facade, here's crazy Zuli, she's fun, da da da. And every time I would go home and I would just cry because I felt really alone. And so I did this piece because it was the one piece that I needed to do in order to push myself out of that shame, in order to open up to people and to talk to them about being battered. And it's a two-piece, it's a two-part piece, and it says in front, the mask you see is a facade of strength. She hides behind a veil that hides her pain, a veil that reveals none other than the pain of its shame. The only way to really overcome shame is just to hit it head on. I will no longer let this monster of shame keep me in shadows. So from there, I became my own advocate, and I started advocating for, in the criminal proceedings, writing my state attorneys, letting them know, what's going on, what's happening. And it's very frustrating because when I got down to it and I started to look into my case, I realized that they had changed my charge. He was charged with burglary battery, which is a first-degree felony, and it's punishable up to life in prison. But because I was his girlfriend and he had lived with me one time, they bumped it down to a third-degree felony, burglary, which was domestic violence with strangulation, and felony battery, which is punishable up to 5 years in prison. So they do a couple things, and then they do a sentencing computation to come up with his sentence. And he was supposed to be sentenced anywhere between 25 years to 2 years. And my batterer got 2 years, 11 months, 10 days. He'll be released in September of this year. And I felt like justice was robbed from me. And I felt like I became nameless. I became another file on a desk. So what I did was poured it all. I don't blame one specific person, I blame the system. And I think that what we need to do is we really need to push towards our legislators to change laws, because if he batters you, it shouldn't be qualified by a domestic violence charge. It is what it is. The next piece that I did was scared. I suffered from PTSD. Just like when he says, like, it haunts you. The words that he says to you, the things that he says to you, it haunts you. And I was scared for a long time. And quite frankly, I was sick and tired of being scared. And so I thought, what am I going to do? What am I going to do? And I remember my therapist said, you have to push through the pain. Push through pain. So I did. I pushed through the pain. And when I was scared, I took pictures. I wrote. When I was scared, I faced it on. I created safety plans with my friends. So if I got scared, I could just say a word, and they would recognize that I was scared, and they would help me through it, and we would get through it. Because I did not want to go to prison by fear anymore. And then the last and final piece that I did, I think I just need to take you back to the beginning. And that is, I started my series with a heart. And I ended my series with a heart. And like I said, I am a poet. I think the best way to really describe this piece is just to gift you guys with a poem that I wrote about being battered. It's called Darkness Crept In. My heartbreak came in the form of fists pounding against my flesh, which no longer registered itself to my consciousness. My body battered and overcome pain, no longer held its sting, and darkness crept in. Hair being pulled, keeping head in place. Fingers scraping at my flesh. Words uttered by my lover's lips no longer had the sweet melody that my ears had once thirsted for. Now grunts of fury oozed out of his clenched jaw, fueled by a rage that had possessed him. Fingers laced themselves around my neck. He grips and squeezes, and darkness crept in. As my body battled between the reality that lay before me and my destiny, I thought, this must be what dying is like. It would be easy just to go to sleep. I don't think that I can get him off me, and I am so exhausted. Is this the end of me? What will my friends and family say of me? Because quite frankly, I feel like I have no fight left in me. And so I lay here worrying how they will remember me. And then thoughts take me to my babies, my boys. How will they cope with their mama's death? Their mother gone, taken from them. It's obvious who you think they blame for this tragedy, but I lay there worrying if they would blame him or me. Would they forgive me for this heartbreak, for this memory? And so darkness crept in. You see, it started with one beating, then two. Then two beatings equaled a withered me, and as he towered above me, never believing that it could or would get this bad, 1,000,001 regretful thoughts invaded me, and I thought, I should have known better. I didn't want to be with him, but yet in my weakness, I didn't want him to leave. I had longed and hungered for a tender touch because this guilt that I felt for my losses, they weighed on me and they claimed on me and built a prison of shame around me, and I wanted him to love me more than I could love myself, because if I had loved me, then forgiveness wouldn't be this misconceived concept that I was willing to give him, but not me. And so darkness crept in. But in the midst of that blackness, a lost but familiar voice emerged and echoed through the chambers of my soul. And it said, haunted by guilt, shame has quieted me, but I have never gone away. I am still here. And we are under attack. The promises of this world will be ours. But Zuli, you must fight and you must rise. My soul spoke. It said, this is not your destiny. You need to rise. You need to fight off this darkness. The road ahead, yes, will be difficult. You may stumble along the way, but you will get up. You may feel a terrifying fear that will grip you, but you will stand toe-to-toe against it. You will face it, and you will not waver. You will begin to love, forgive, and take care of yourself. You will turn this around one day. You may not believe this now, but you are still you. and you are strong. Fight. Fight, and let not your death be tragic and too soon, but let it be at its due time. Fight for all that we have done for us, for our community, for our family. Fight for your legacy. Fight so that your reach can be felt. Fight and let him see rising before him the woman he tried to silence with his words and his fists. Let him see that she still lives. And so I did. I did not go silently into the darkness of the night. I fought for the self that sought me. I fought because my soul knew all that I needed to know. I fought because only I could love me more than anybody else could. For the best of me was yet to be, and I fought for all that is and all that will be. I fought to be able to stand here today. I'm a voice. I am a voice, and I will no longer hide behind shadows of shame. And with this voice, I fight for those women who suffer in silence and her children who watch timidly. I fight for the victims gone of yesterday, for the courageous of today, and for the survivors and the thrivers of tomorrow. You see, my flesh was bruised. My heart was bruised. But I was not broken. And in the purest essence of the word, in me, through me, and around me, I